At 92 years old, Mildred Parker believed her life was destined for loneliness, marked by the devastating loss of her family in a tragic accident. But one day, 3 little girls knocked on her door, bringing with them secrets that would change everything. What seemed like a simple visit quickly turns into a shocking revelation that forces Mildred to relive her deepest pain and confront truths that had been buried for years. This is a story about betrayal, family secrets, and the struggle for truth, even when it seems too late. Watch until the end to discover how Mildred, a woman who thought she had lost everything, finds strength where she least expected. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with those who believe in the power of truth and justice. Mildred Parker sat in her old rocking chair on the porch of her house, surrounded by the calm of the late afternoon. The soft sound of dry leaves being blown by the wind was the only sound that had accompanied her for years. At 92, Mildred was accustomed to loneliness. It had been her constant companion since the tragic accident that took the lives of her entire family decades ago. The house that was once full of life, laughter, and movement was now just a memory of days she tried, with great effort, to forget. The neighborhood had changed over the years. The old neighbors had moved away, and the younger families that arrived had little interest in interacting with the elderly woman who lived alone. Mildred rarely left her house. Her daily routine consisted of short walks on the porch, tending to her plants, and gazing at the deserted street. Even the occasional visits from social workers had become less frequent over time. To her, the days were all the same, long, empty, and silent. She looked up at the sky as the sun began to set, painting the clouds with a soft orange hue. Her mind started to wander, recalling moments spent with her children, grandchildren, and husband. The memories were vivid, almost tangible, but each one was accompanied by a deep pain, a pain that had never left her. The accident. It always came back to that moment, like an emotional prison from which she could not escape. Mildred sighed, feeling the weight of the years and the solitude pressing down on her fragile shoulders. It was as if the world had forgotten her. As her tired eyes scanned the empty street in front of her, something unexpected caught her attention. 3 small figures were approaching, walking side by side. At first, she thought it was a trick of her weary mind, but as the figures drew closer, she realized they were children, 3 little girls, no more than a few years old. She leaned forward slightly, watching with curiosity. The triplets had curly hair and wore simple clothes, but it was their expressions that truly captured Mildred's attention. Their faces did not bear the typical smiles of small children, but something much more serious and heavy. They walked with slow, purposeful steps, which was unusual for children their age. Mildred felt a wave of unease rise in her chest. What were these girls doing alone? Where were their parents? And why were they coming toward her? She hadn't received visitors in a long time, and certainly not from children this young. The girls finally reached the front of the porch. Mildred remained silent, waiting for them to speak. There was something about their presence that made her feel alert, as if a shadow from the past was about to reemerge. The girls exchanged brief glances before one of them, with deep brown eyes and a face too serious for her age, stepped forward. "Hello," the girl began, her voice soft but clear. "You're Mrs. Mildred Parker, right?" Mildred blinked, surprised. These children shouldn't have known her name. She barely knew the people in the neighborhood, and she certainly didn't know these triplets. Something was wrong, but before she could respond, another girl, with long curls and bright eyes, interrupted. "We need to talk to you about something important," she said, her voice slightly trembling. Mildred felt a chill run down her spine. The children's words were soft, but the serious tone in which they spoke made her feel a sense of discomfort. For a brief moment, Mildred remembered when her own children were small. The small figures in front of her evoked a painful nostalgia. There was something familiar in the way the girls looked at her, as if they shared a silent sadness, something only those who had suffered deep losses could understand. "What do you want?" Mildred asked, her voice coming out harsher than she intended. She wasn't used to talking to anyone, and the fact that these girls were there looking at her with such seriousness was stirring memories she preferred to keep buried. The third girl, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. Her voice was almost a whisper, but there was a strange firmness in it. "We came because you need to know the truth about what happened many years ago." Mildred's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" The girls looked at each other again, as if trying to decide who should continue. Mildred felt the air around her grow denser, almost suffocating. Something in the way they spoke, in the way they looked at her, made her realize, deep in her soul, that whatever they were about to reveal would not be easy to hear. "There's something you don't know, Mrs. Mildred," the first girl said again. "Something about your family, something that changed everything." Mildred froze. Her mind began racing with questions, but before she could process what was happening, the girl closest to her stepped forward and took her hand. Her touch was cold, but firm. "We need to tell you because we're part of this," whispered the girl with the brown eyes. "We're part of your story." And in that moment, as the wind gently blew around them, Mildred knew that her life was about to change forever. Before we continue with this powerful story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. That's how you can contribute and help us keep bringing you meaningful stories about justice and overcoming challenges. Click the subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Let's continue. Mildred felt a knot form in her throat. Those small, cold hands holding hers, the serious and determined look on the girls' faces. It all made her feel like she was trapped in a nightmare. She struggled to remain calm, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Part of my story? What do you mean by that?" Her voice trembled slightly, and she squeezed the girl's hand, as if needing something to anchor her in that moment of confusion. The girl with the brown eyes looked up, locking eyes with Mildred. "We are part of your family." Her words were calm, but they carried a weight that left Mildred breathless for a moment. Mildred pulled back slightly, letting go of the girl's hand as if it had burned her. "That's impossible," she murmured, feeling her mind spin in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. "My family is gone. All of them. I know what happened." "No, you don't," said the girl with long curls. Her voice was soft, but there was a firmness that seemed to come from a deeper place. "There's more that happened during that accident, things you never knew." The words pierced Mildred's heart like a knife. The accident. The memory of that day was etched in her mind like a scar that never faded. The headlights, the sound of metal twisting, the screams. And then silence. Emptiness. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to push that memory away, but it was useless. "I was there. I saw what happened. My husband, my children, my grandchildren, they're all gone. There's nothing you can tell me that I don't already know." The girls were silent for a moment, their faces serious and compassionate, as if they could feel the pain that had been lodged in Mildred's chest for so many years. The girl with the long curls stepped forward, and with a trembling voice, she began to explain. "The accident wasn't what you think. It wasn't just an accident. Someone made it happen." Mildred froze. She heard those words, but they didn't make sense to her. "What are you saying?" Her voice came out almost as a whisper, filled with fear and disbelief. "This doesn't make sense. How could someone make this happen?" The third girl, who had not spoken much until now, stepped forward. "There was someone important who did something wrong. They knew the car had problems, but they didn't tell anyone. They knew what could happen, but they didn't warn anyone." The words echoed in Mildred's ears like distant thunder. She could barely process what she was hearing. The girls spoke with such certainty, but how could they know something like this? They were just children. "Who told you this? How could you know something so terrible?" Her voice trembled, and tears began to form in her eyes. "That's why we're here," said the girl with the brown eyes. "We're part of this story because we're your granddaughters." The words fell like a bomb on Mildred's heart. Her breath caught, her eyes wide with shock. That's not possible," she stammered, her mind racing to find some logic, some explanation that made sense. Her granddaughters? But all of her granddaughters had died in that accident. How could these children be standing in front of her, claiming to be part of her family? The girl with the long curls shook her head, as if understanding Mildred's confusion. We know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. We didn't die in that accident. We were taken out of the car before the impact. They saved us, but they hid us from you. Hid you? Mildred's voice was weak, almost inaudible. Who would do such a thing? Why? They hid us to protect us, said the third girl, finally breaking her silence. But also to keep secrets. Secrets they didn't want you to know. The people who did this, they were afraid you would discover the truth about what really happened. Mildred couldn't believe what she was hearing. The girl's words spun in her mind like a whirlwind, leaving her even more confused and distressed. But there was something, a small spark of truth, that began to emerge from the depths of her memory. Something she had buried long ago. When I was in the hospital, right after the accident, Mildred began to speak slowly, as if she were reliving those moments. I remember asking about my granddaughters. No one gave me a clear answer. They just told me they didn't survive, but they never let me see them. The girls nodded, as if that part of the story confirmed what they were trying to reveal. Because they didn't want you to know we were alive, said the girl with long curls. They knew that if you found out, you'd start asking questions that would lead you to discover the truth. Mildred stood still, feeling as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Who would do something like this? Who had enough power to hide my granddaughters from me? The girls looked at each other, as if trying to decide whether they should continue. The tension in the air was palpable, and the silence seemed to weigh on Mildred's shoulders like a heavy blanket. Finally, the girl with the brown eyes broke the silence. It was someone very close to you, someone you trusted. Mildred felt her blood turn to ice in her veins. Her mind began to wander through familiar faces, people who had been by her side during the darkest days of her life. But who could be capable of such a terrible betrayal? Who? She asked, her voice hoarse and almost breathless. The girls hesitated for a moment before answering. Your own son? The girl's words echoed in Mildred's mind like distant thunder. Your own son? The idea that her son, her beloved David, could have played a role in the loss of her family left her utterly stunned. The memories she had always held dear, though painful, were now being distorted by a revelation that seemed impossible to believe. She looked at the three girls, their small hands still clasped together, their faces serious and calm. They were waiting for her reaction, but Mildred didn't know what to say. How could she accept something so monstrous? No, this can't be true. Her voice was weak, and she felt the tears welling up in her eyes. David would never do something like that. He was my son. He was a good man. The girls remained silent for a moment, letting Mildred's words hang in the heavy air. The girl with the brown eyes, the most serious of the three, stepped forward and spoke with a disconcerting calmness. We know it's hard to accept, but he wasn't the man you thought he was. Mildred recoiled, shaking her head in denial. Her frail body trembled, and the feeling of betrayal spread through her entire being. He was my son. I raised him. How could this be possible? Why? What would he have to gain from this? She knew she needed answers, but the shock was preventing her from thinking clearly. The girl with the long curls sighed softly before speaking. He had debts, Mrs. Mildred, big debts, and there were people, dangerous people involved. He was desperate to protect what was left of his life, and the only way to do that was to make sure you and the others didn't know the truth. Mildred swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every word fall heavily on her shoulders. Debts? Dangerous people? This didn't make sense. David had always been responsible, careful. He had a good career, a good family. How could he have gotten involved in something so dark? This doesn't make sense, she said, more to herself than to the girls. David never told me about debts. He never mentioned any of this. Because he couldn't, answered the third girl, who had spoken very little until now. He was in a difficult situation, and telling the truth would have put all of you at risk. But he made the worst possible decision. He chose the easy way out, the way that would guarantee his own survival. But it destroyed the lives of everyone around him. Mildred felt a wave of anger rising inside her. It was as if, for all these years, she had been living a lie. Every moment she shared with David, every conversation, every hug, every laugh, all of it now seemed tainted by this new reality she was being forced to face. He lied to me. For years, he made me believe that everything was fine, Mildred said, her voice now trembling with emotion. How could he do this? How could he betray his own mother like this? The girls remained silent, but their eyes were filled with empathy, as if they deeply understood the pain Mildred was feeling. The silence between them seemed to stretch for an eternity until the girl with the brown eyes spoke again, her voice soft but determined. He never wanted you to know. He thought he was protecting you, but in the end he destroyed everything. Protecting? Mildred repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. He didn't protect me. He deceived me, left me alone. I spent all these years believing that the accident was just that, an accident. But now you're telling me he knew all along. The girl with the long curls nodded slowly. Yes. He knew the car had problems, that something was wrong. He knew that if he didn't say anything, it could end badly. But he thought he could fix everything in time. And when he realized he couldn't, it was already too late. Mildred felt a tightening in her chest. The pain, which she had already accepted as part of her life, now seemed to multiply. How could she live with this? How could she continue knowing that her own son had played a role in the destruction of her family? She closed her eyes, trying to process all the information the girls had revealed. Her mind was in chaos, full of questions and conflicting emotions. She remembered the last day she spent with David before the accident. He was tense, but he hid it well. He said everything was fine, that he had everything under control. Now Mildred knew those words were lies. He never wanted this to happen, continued the girl with brown eyes, interrupting Mildred's thoughts. But when it did, he couldn't handle the guilt, and that's why he disappeared. That last detail hit Mildred hard. David had disappeared from her life shortly after the accident. He was never the same, and eventually, he cut off all contact, distancing himself completely. She had always believed he was trying to cope with the pain in his own way, but now she realized that guilt was the real reason. He abandoned me, Mildred murmured, feeling her anger turn into deep sadness. He left me alone to deal with all of this. The girls nodded, their faces carrying the same sadness that Mildred felt. They moved closer once again, and the girl with the long curls placed her hand over Mildred's. We know this is hard, but you need to know the truth. You need to face what happened, because it's the only way to move forward. Mildred looked at the girls, their small figures seeming so fragile, yet so determined. She knew they were right. For years, she had clung to that pain, that loneliness, never questioning what really happened. Now the truth was in front of her, and as devastating as it was, she knew she had to face it. I don't know if I can, Mildred said, her voice broken by the weight of the revelation. I don't know if I can live with this. The girl with brown eyes gently squeezed her hand. You're not alone, Mrs. Mildred. We're here with you. We'll get through this together. Mildred looked at the girls, feeling a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. She was still devastated, still lost, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Mildred settled back into her rocking chair, her body feeling the weight of years of internal struggles that were now starting to crumble around her. She looked at the triplets, trying to find some familiar trait, something that connected her to them beyond the devastating words they had just shared. They seemed so small, so fragile, but the truth they had brought with them carried the weight of a lifetime. David's name echoed in her mind like a distant refrain, filled with confusing memories. David, the son she had always trusted, now seemed like a stranger, someone who had kept dark secrets. The girl's revelations had opened a wound that Mildred believed had long since healed, but now that pain had returned, rawer than ever. Why did he do this? Mildred asked more to herself than to the girls. Memories of the past began to come in waves, each one bringing with it a new layer of pain and distrust. What would make him betray his own family? The girl with the brown eyes stepped forward, sensing that this was the crucial question. David was a man torn between his love for you and the weight of the debts and responsibilities he had. He got involved with the wrong people. At first, he believed he could control the situation, that he could fix everything before you or the rest of the family found out. But when he realized he was trapped, he made a terrible decision. Mildred closed her eyes, reliving the moments when her son seemed distant, absent, as if he were carrying an invisible burden. There were nights when he seemed distracted, lost in thought, but she had never questioned it deeply. She always believed he was just tired from work, from the responsibilities of family life. Now, she wondered how she hadn't noticed. "He was my son," Mildred murmured, trying to hold back the tears. "I should have noticed something was wrong. I should have done something." "You trusted him as any mother would trust her son," said the girl with long curls, trying to comfort her. "He hid it from everyone, including you. But in the end, he was in a position he couldn't escape." The memory of David came to Mildred's mind with more clarity. He had always been the most ambitious of her children, always looking to prove something to the world. Since he was young, David had an insatiable thirst for success. He wanted to be more than just the son of an ordinary family. He wanted to be recognized, admired. And Mildred, as a mother, had always supported him, believing he was destined for great things. But David's ambition, now she saw, had a dark side. It was that same ambition that led him to make deals with the wrong people, to take on debts he couldn't repay, to make desperate decisions that eventually destroyed everything. "He was afraid," said the girl with brown eyes, continuing to reveal the story. "He knew that if he didn't pay his debts, dangerous people would come after you and the rest of the family. He thought he was protecting everyone by keeping it a secret. But in the end, that's what put everyone in danger." Mildred struggled to process that information. The image of her son now seemed distorted, as if the David she had known had been replaced by someone darker, someone she never would have imagined. Yet, the girl's words also brought to light an inner dilemma. David, despite his devastating mistakes, seemed to have acted out of fear, in an attempt to protect his family in the only way he knew. "He never wanted this to happen," said the third girl, with a voice so soft it sounded almost like a prayer. "But when he realized it was too late, he made the decision to hide us. He couldn't face you, he couldn't face the truth, so he disappeared, hoping time would heal the wounds he had caused." Mildred felt the weight of the words, and a new wave of emotions flooded over her. She couldn't fully understand why David had distanced himself after the accident, but now everything made sense. The weight of guilt had been unbearable for him. He chose to disappear rather than face the consequences of his actions. "I lost him twice then," Mildred murmured, as tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. "Once in the accident, and again when he chose to leave me." The girls remained silent for a moment, allowing Mildred to process the enormity of that loss. She had not only lost her family in the accident, but she had also lost her son to the weight of guilt and shame. "And what happened after?" Mildred asked, her voice trembling. "You said you were saved, but who did this? Who was involved?" The girls looked at each other again, and this time, it was the girl with long curls who spoke. "There were people close to your family who knew about David's debts, but kept it a secret. When the accident happened, they saw an opportunity to hide the children, believing it was the only way to protect all of you." Mildred frowned. "People close? Who would do this? Who knew about the situation and didn't tell me?" "It was the family lawyer," answered the girl with the brown eyes. "He was involved in David's business dealings. He knew about the debts and the dangers, but he thought that by keeping it a secret, he could fix things on his own. But he never succeeded," added the girl with long curls. "Instead, he hid us, thinking it was the best thing to do. He took us away from you, believing he was saving us. But in reality, he was just perpetuating the lie." A shock ran through Mildred's body once again. The family lawyer? She had always trusted him, always believed he was on her side during the worst moments of her life. Now, learning that he had kept such deep secrets left her completely devastated. "I can't believe that so many people I trusted lied to me," she said, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Why didn't anyone tell me the truth? Why did I have to find out this way so many years later?" The girls were silent for a moment, and then the girl with brown eyes spoke, with a softness that was almost sad, "Because they thought they were protecting you. But in the end, it was the lie that kept you imprisoned all these years." Mildred took a deep breath, trying to absorb everything that had been said. The truth was bitter, but she knew she had to face it. She had spent years living in a prison of loneliness, believing her family had been taken from her by a simple accident. But now she saw that the chains that bound her were made of secrets and lies. "I want justice," Mildred finally said, her voice firm and filled with determination. "I need to know the full truth, no matter how painful it is. And those who did this need to pay." The girls nodded, seeming to understand Mildred's decision. "We will help you uncover the whole truth," said the girl with long curls. "But it will be painful. There are more things you don't yet know." Mildred nodded, knowing she was only at the beginning of a difficult but necessary journey. She felt that, finally, after all these years, she was starting to step out of the shadows of lies and move toward the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. Mildred felt as though she was navigating a stormy sea. The revelations from the girls had brought a wave of emotions she didn't know how to control. Her tired body bore not only the weight of her age, but also decades of lies, betrayals, and deceptions. However, at the same time, a flame of determination had ignited in her heart. For the first time in many years, she felt that there might be a chance to finally find the truth and, perhaps, some form of justice. She looked at the triplets, these small figures who had appeared at her door like messengers from the past. Mildred believed that with their help, she might finally be close to solving the mystery that had haunted her life for so many years. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but she knew there was still much to uncover. "You mentioned the family lawyer," Mildred began, her voice now more resolute, fueled by her newfound determination. "If he was involved in this, then he must know much more than what I've been told. Maybe he has all the answers." The girls exchanged glances, and the girl with brown eyes slowly nodded. "Yes, he knows a lot, but he won't tell the truth easily. He's been involved in this for a long time and has built a web of lies to protect not only himself, but also other people." Mildred frowned, feeling a pang of despair. If the lawyer was so powerful, how could she get the truth out of him? At the same time, the thought of confronting him intrigued her. She had spent years in the dark, and now she was determined to demand answers, no matter the cost. "I need to speak with him," she said, with a firmness that even surprised herself. "He must listen to me. I demand answers. He can't keep hiding this from me." The girl with long curls stepped forward, her eyes filled with empathy. "He'll try to convince you otherwise, Mrs. Mildred. He'll use all the lies he's already told to keep controlling the situation. But there might be something that could force him to talk." Mildred leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What is it? How can I force him to talk?" The third girl, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. "There are documents and evidence that he has kept hidden for years. Papers that show his connection to David's debts and the deals he made. These documents were kept secret, so no one could find out the truth. But we know where they are." Mildred felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Documents? Evidence? Perhaps she was closer to uncovering the truth than she had imagined. "Where are these documents?" she asked, her voice heavy with urgency. "They're in his office," replied the girl with brown eyes. "In the safe he keeps hidden behind a bookshelf. If you can access those papers, you'll have the proof you need to confront him. He won't be able to deny what he's done." For a moment, Mildred felt as though she might finally be in control of the situation. The girls were giving her the key to unlocking the mystery that had haunted her life. If she could find those documents, she would have the truth in her hands. She imagined confronting the lawyer, demanding answers, watching him squirm as the undeniable evidence came to light. The thought brought her a sense of relief, as if she were finally on the verge of seeing justice served. "I'll do it," Mildred declared, her voice carrying a new confidence. "I'll go to his office and find those documents. He won't fool me anymore." The girls exchanged worried looks, but said nothing. Mildred, however, noticed the hesitation on their faces. "What is it? Do you think this won't work?" "It's not that, Mrs. Mildred," said the girl with long curls cautiously. "It's just that he's very clever. If you're not careful, he might figure out your intentions before you have a chance to find the evidence. And if that happens, he could destroy everything before you get what you need." Mildred took a deep breath, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. She couldn't act recklessly. She needed to be careful, strategic. But as much as she understood the risks, her desire to finally get answers was stronger than any fear. She had spent years living in the shadow of a lie, and now that she was so close to the truth, she couldn't turn back. "I'll be careful," she promised, her eyes fixed on the girls. "But I can't live with these doubts any longer. I need to confront what happened, and if these documents are the key, then I will find them." The girls slowly nodded, as if they understood Mildred's determination. However, there was still a shadow of concern on their faces. They knew, as did Mildred, that the path she was about to take would not be easy. The next morning, Mildred prepared for what would be the most decisive day of her life since the accident. She had spent the night wide awake, reflecting on everything the girls had revealed. Every detail, every fragment of truth that had been uncovered seemed to weigh on her shoulders, but at the same time, she felt a renewed strength within her. She dressed with a cold determination, her heart racing, but her mind focused on one goal: to get the answers she had sought for so long. The girls had given her detailed instructions on where to find the documents, and Mildred knew she couldn't waste any time. The lawyer's office was located in an old building in the city center. Mildred hadn't been there in years, not since the legal formalities surrounding the accident had been settled. Back then, she had trusted him completely, believing he was doing everything to protect her and handle the most painful aspects of the tragedy. Now, knowing that he had been involved in hiding the truth left her with a mixture of anger and sadness. As she entered the building, she noticed how everything seemed the same: the walls, the furniture, the slightly musty smell of old paper. But something inside her had changed. She was no longer the fragile, confused woman who had walked through those halls years ago. Now, she was on a mission, and she wouldn't rest until she found what she was looking for. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, was seated behind his desk, his gray hair neatly combed and his suit immaculate as always. He looked up when Mildred entered, and a look of surprise quickly formed on his face. "Mildred," he exclaimed, with a smile that seemed forced. "What a surprise to see you here. How have you been?" Mildred maintained a rigid posture, her face serious. "I'm here because I need to talk to you about what really happened to my family." Harrison blinked, his smile faltering briefly before he recovered. "Oh, Mildred, we discussed this years ago. You know, it was a terrible tragedy, but everything was settled legally." Mildred pressed her lips together, knowing she was stepping into dangerous territory. "There are things that weren't told, Mr. Harrison, things I need to know, and I'm not leaving here without answers." The lawyer leaned back in his chair, the smile disappearing for good. His gaze grew more cautious, almost suspicious. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mildred, but I think you're mistaken." Mildred swallowed hard. She could feel that he was starting to sense her intentions. However, before she could move forward in her investigation, an unexpected twist would emerge, one she didn't see coming. Mildred felt a palpable tension in the air, as if something was about to fall apart. Mr. Harrison's expression had quickly changed, shifting from cordiality to a calculated coldness, something she had never seen before. It was as though a mask had dropped, revealing the man he truly was. She knew she was in dangerous territory, but there was no turning back now. She was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting someone she had known and trusted for so many years. Harrison leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced on the desk. His eyes examined Mildred with caution. "Mildred, you're bringing up things that were settled long ago. Everything that could be done was done, and there's nothing more I can add." Mildred remained still, her gaze fixed on him. "I know there's more. You hid things from me, and now I'm here to find out the truth. There's no point in hiding anymore." For a moment, Harrison said nothing. He studied her, as if trying to assess how much she knew and how much he could reveal without incriminating himself. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally replied, his voice smooth but carrying a hint of menace. "I think you're confused. It's been many years, and perhaps your memory isn't as clear as it once was." Mildred felt a chill run down her spine. He was trying to manipulate her, to make her doubt herself. But she wouldn't give in. "Not now. My memory is clearer than ever, Mr. Harrison. And I know there are documents you've hidden. Proof that you were involved in David's dealings. Proof that ties you to all of this." Harrison blinked, and for the first time, Mildred saw a flicker of worry in his eyes. It lasted only a moment, but she noticed it. He knew exactly what she was talking about. "Documents?" He leaned forward slightly, forcing a smile. "Mildred, you're being ridiculous. There are no documents. This is just a fantasy created by your mind because of the pain and trauma." Mildred's heart began to race. She knew she was close, but she could also sense that Harrison was about to do something to prevent her from finding out more. "If there are no documents, then there's no reason to stop me from looking, right?" she challenged, trying to maintain her composure. The lawyer leaned back again, but his smile had completely disappeared. "I won't allow you to rummage through my files, Mildred. You've been through enough, and what you're suggesting is serious. I suggest you go home and rest. It's not worth reliving all of this for nothing." The implicit threat in his words didn't escape Mildred. Harrison was trying to push her away, to shove her back into the darkness of her solitude, where she could be easily controlled. But Mildred was no longer the fragile, submissive woman who had accepted his half-truths for so many years. She had the triplets by her side, and now she knew more than he realized. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "You owe me answers, Harrison, and I will get them, with or without your help." Harrison narrowed his eyes, and for a moment, Mildred was sure he was going to throw her out of the office. But instead, he smiled a cold, calculated smile. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into, Mildred. There are things you don't understand. The truth may be more painful than you imagine." Mildred didn't blink. The truth is already painful enough, but not more painful than living all these years without knowing what really happened. Harrison sighed deeply and stood up from his chair, walking slowly toward a bookshelf at the back of the room. He seemed deliberately slow, as if he was trying to buy time to think about his next move. "If you really want to know, Mildred, if you're willing to reopen old wounds, then I can show you something." His voice carried an almost veiled threat, and Mildred felt the tightness in her chest grow. She knew something was coming, but she didn't know what. When he finally reached the bookshelf, he pulled out a thick book, revealing a safe embedded in the wall behind it. Mildred felt a chill run down her spine. The girls had been right. There was the safe where he kept the evidence, the documents that would incriminate not only David, but also Harrison. Her heart raced. She was so close to uncovering the truth, to finally getting the answers she had been seeking for so long. Harrison opened the safe with steady hands, and the metallic sound of the lock echoed through the small office. He pulled out a thick, heavy envelope and brought it to Mildred. "Here it is," he said, placing the envelope on the desk. "All the documents you've been looking for." Mildred reached out, but before she could touch the envelope, Harrison pulled it back. "But before I hand this over to you, you need to understand something." He looked at her with intensity, his words heavy with a dark warning. "What you're about to discover may destroy the image you have of your son. This will change everything." Mildred held his gaze unwavering. She was already aware of that. Nothing could be more devastating than the revelations the triplets had shared. "I need to know the truth," she said with conviction. "No matter what it is." Harrison stared at her for a few more seconds before finally sliding the envelope toward her. "Very well, Mildred. Here is the truth." She took the envelope, feeling the symbolic weight of it in her hands. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she broke the seal and began to leaf through the papers inside. The silence in the office was so thick that she could hear her own breathing. But as she read the first few lines, her heart began to pound. The words on the paper told a much darker story than she could have imagined. It wasn't just debts that David had. He was involved in a complex network of illegal dealings with dangerous people, and Harrison knew everything. More than that, he had helped cover it up to protect both himself and David. Mildred began to tremble, feeling shock wash over her body. The girls had said Harrison was involved, but now she saw just how deeply he was entangled in this. He wasn't just a lawyer trying to help his client. He was an accomplice, as guilty as David. She looked at Harrison, her eyes filled with fury and despair. "You knew. You helped my son destroy his life, and mine too." Harrison didn't move. "I did what was necessary to protect him, to protect you. If the truth had come out back then, you both would have been destroyed. I did what was right by stealing my granddaughters from me." Mildred's voice trembled. "By hiding the truth for all these years? Is that what you call protection?" Harrison remained silent, his expressions now unreadable. But Mildred could see it in his eyes. He had no remorse. There was no regret for what he had done. "You're as guilty as David," she whispered, clutching the envelope in her hands. "And I'll make sure you pay for it." But before Mildred could leave the office, something unexpected happened. Harrison took a step toward her, his expression growing darker. "You're not leaving here with those documents, Mildred." Before she could react, he lunged forward, snatching the envelope from her hands. "I told you there are things you don't know, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure this never leaves here." Harrison's office, which once seemed like just another stuffy, ordinary room, now felt like a battlefield. Mildred watched, her heart racing, as the lawyer backed away, holding the envelope that contained the answers she had sought for so long. Her body trembled, not just from age, but from the anger building inside her. Harrison had revealed his true face, and Mildred knew she was in grave danger. "You can't do this." Mildred's voice came out more fragile than she had intended. "I've spent all these years living in agony, thinking I lost my family in an accident. And now you want to steal the only chance I have to know the truth." Harrison looked at her with a cold, calculating expression, showing no trace of empathy. "I told you you don't understand the complexity of all this, Mildred. The truth is more dangerous than you realize, and frankly, I don't think you're ready to deal with the consequences." Mildred felt a tightness in her chest. The man standing before her, once a family friend, now seemed like a dangerous stranger. For years, she had seen him as an ally, someone who had helped guide her family through the darkest times. But now she realized he had always been working in secret, manipulating and hiding the darkest truths. "You manipulated everything," Mildred whispered, her voice heavy with disbelief. "You made me believe you were protecting me, but you were only protecting yourself. All of this, all these secrets, it was all so you wouldn't be exposed." Harrison didn't deny it. "I did what needed to be done, Mildred. David was a man who had fallen from grace. He got involved with dangerous people, made bad decisions. If the truth had come out, not only he, but you, your family, all of you would have been destroyed. So, you decided to destroy me and my family in a different way, taking my granddaughters from me, leaving me alone all these years." Mildred felt the anger growing inside her, the injustice of it all suffocating her. "You stole my life. You stole what was left of my family." Harrison shrugged, as if the weight of his actions was irrelevant to him. "It was a matter of survival, Mildred. You could never understand what was at stake." Mildred's blood boiled. The facade he had maintained for so long was on the verge of being shattered. and she couldn't let him destroy the evidence. The girls had given her the key to finding the truth, but now she was trapped in this confrontation with Harrison, who seemed willing to do anything to protect his secrets. "I can expose you," Mildred said, trying to sound more resolute. "These documents are enough to prove what you did. No matter how hard you try to hide it, the truth will come out. And when it does, you'll pay." Harrison smiled, a sinister smile that made Mildred shiver. "Mildred, no one is going to believe a 92-year-old woman who has lived alone for so long. Do you really think you can fight the system? The truth is, even if you manage to walk out of here with those documents, who would believe you?" Mildred felt despair rising inside her, but at the same time, something else began to emerge. A flame of resistance. For all these years, she had been underestimated, treated like a helpless victim. But now, she knew she had the truth on her side, and that was more powerful than any manipulation Harrison could pull. "I have people who believe in me," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'm not alone anymore. The triplets found me and told me the truth, and I'm going to fight for them." Harrison frowned, clearly disturbed by her mention of the triplets. He looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "The triplets? What are you talking about?" Mildred stepped forward, now feeling the power of her words. "Yes, they told me everything. They're alive, Harrison. They know what you did. And no matter what happens, the truth is going to come out. I'll expose what you and David did." Harrison stood silent for a moment, processing the information. There was a palpable tension in the air, and Mildred knew they were nearing the breaking point. She could see that he was growing nervous, as if the mention of the triplets had cracked something inside him. That's impossible," he murmured, taking a few steps back. "They can't be alive. They can't know." "But they do," Mildred affirmed. "And now you know that you can't keep hiding this. The truth will come out." Harrison closed his eyes for a moment, his posture stiff, as if trying to control the panic that was starting to creep in. "Mildred, if you keep pushing this, you're going to regret it. I can guarantee no one will believe you. I have influence power. It won't do any good to fight against this." Mildred didn't back down. The pain, the loneliness, and the suffering of all these years were transforming into a new strength, something she had never known she possessed. "I've already lost everything, Harrison. I have nothing left to lose." "But you lose everything when the truth comes out." Harrison stepped forward, throwing the envelope onto the table. His expression was full of restrained anger, his hands trembling. "You want the truth? Then take it. But know that it will destroy you too." Mildred didn't hesitate. She grabbed the envelope firmly, feeling the weight of the decision in her hands. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but she was ready to face the consequences. Harrison watched her with a dark look, as if waiting for a final move, something that could turn the game in his favor. And then suddenly, he lunged forward again, snatching the envelope from her hands. "I'm not letting this end like this," he muttered, his voice laced with fury. "You're not leaving here with that evidence, Mildred." Mildred felt the desperation rising again. She was so close, and now Harrison was ready to destroy everything. But before she could react, she heard an unexpected sound coming from the office door. The sound of small footsteps. She turned around, and to her surprise, the triplets were standing there in the doorway, their faces calm but determined. They had come. Somehow, they knew Mildred would need them. And now, with their presence, Mildred felt a new wave of strength. "Let her go," one of the girls said, her voice surprisingly firm for someone so young. "You can't hide the truth any longer." Harrison froze for a moment, shock written across his face. The girls continued to move forward, their small yet powerful presence filling the room with an energy that seemed beyond their years. "They're alive," Harrison murmured, disbelief clear in his voice. How is this possible?" Mildred, now renewed by the presence of the triplets, looked directly at Harrison. "Now you understand, Harrison. The truth always finds a way out. And I'm not alone anymore." Harrison backed away, fear now evident in his eyes. The girls stood firm, their expressions calm but unyielding. "You will pay for what you did," another girl said, her voice soft yet threatening. Harrison, realizing he was cornered, stood still. The triplets were living proof that his secrets could no longer be kept hidden. He knew he had lost. Mildred, feeling the power of the moment, took the envelope from the table once more, this time without any resistance from Harrison. With the girls by her side, she knew she now had everything she needed to finally expose the truth. Harrison, now completely cornered, retreated slowly, no longer wearing the confident and manipulative posture he had displayed earlier. The weight of the lies and secrets he had carried for so many years seemed to finally crush him, and the look of panic on his face revealed that, for the first time, he understood he was about to lose everything. Mildred, holding the envelope firmly in her hands, felt an odd sense of calm wash over her. The triplets, who had been the thread that led to the truth, stood by her side, their small figures giving her more strength than she could have imagined. For so many years, Mildred had lived in darkness, trapped in an emotional prison of pain and loneliness. But now, she was finally about to step out of that darkness and bring the truth to light. Harrison shook his head, as if trying to find a way to reverse the situation. But it was too late. "Mildred, listen," he began, his voice shaky. "We can still fix this. There's still time to prevent everything from collapsing. Think about what this will do to your family's name. Think about the consequences." Mildred didn't hesitate. She looked directly at him, with a firmness that Harrison hadn't expected. "The consequences have already been paid," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "For years, I've lived without knowing the truth, without my family, without my granddaughters. The price has been too high already. Now it's your turn to pay." Harrison took another step forward, his voice filled with desperation. "I did this to protect all of you. I was trying to prevent something worse from happening." Mildred shook her head, cutting him off. "You weren't protecting anyone. You were protecting yourself at the expense of my family." Her words were sharp, like a blade. "You won't control this any longer, Harrison. The truth is here in my hands, and I'll make sure the world knows." The tension in the air was palpable, but Mildred no longer felt fear. For so many years, she had been underestimated, treated as a fragile woman, a victim of time and circumstances. But now, at this crucial moment, she was taking control of her life again. She knew the journey to this point had been painful, but she also knew she was about to get the justice she had sought for so long. Harrison, realizing that his attempts at manipulation were futile, began to show signs of breaking down. His body, once so rigid and confident, now trembled visibly. He looked at the triplets, as if their presence was a painful reminder that all his secrets were about to be exposed. They can't be here, this is impossible," he murmured, almost to himself. The triplets took a step forward, united, their expressions calm and serene. "We are here," one of them said, her voice echoing through the office. "And so is the truth." Mildred looked at the girls with gratitude and love. They were proof that sometimes fate offers a second chance, even when everything seems lost. She knew her life would never be the same, but now she had the chance to find some kind of peace, something she hadn't believed possible for a long time. With the envelope in hand, Mildred turned to leave the office. But before taking the first step, she turned back to Harrison one last time. "These documents will be handed over to the authorities. Your career, your reputation, everything will crumble. You manipulated my family, took my granddaughters from me, but now it's over." Harrison stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the floor. He knew there was nothing more he could do. The truth had won, and Mildred, the woman he had underestimated for so many years, was finally about to defeat him. Mildred, with the help of the triplets, left the office and felt the fresh air outside. It was as if, by crossing that door, she was leaving behind years of suffering, darkness, and secrets. Every step she took was a reminder that she had survived. And more than that, she had fought for what she believed to be right. In the days that followed, Mildred did exactly what she had promised. With the help of a trusted lawyer and the evidence she now possessed, she handed over the documents to the authorities. The case quickly gained attention, and the truth about Harrison and David's involvement in illegal dealings began to come to light. The media covered the case intensely, and Harrison's reputation was ruined. He could no longer manipulate the situation, and he was forced to face the legal consequences of his actions. Mildred, on the other hand, became a symbol of resilience. Her story touched many people, especially when the triplets appeared by her side, showing that the power of truth and justice still existed, even in the darkest of circumstances. She met with the girls every day, slowly building a relationship that time and lies had stolen from her. They were the connection Mildred never thought she would have again, a bond that brought her hope in a world that once felt empty. The triplets, in turn, also found in Mildred a source of strength and love, something they had lost when they were taken away from their grandmother. One peaceful afternoon, Mildred sat on her porch, as she did every day, but this time she wasn't alone. The triplets played in the garden, their laughter filling the air, bringing life to the house that once felt so desolate. Mildred watched them with a smile on her face, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. She knew the journey to get here had been long and painful, filled with challenges that had tested her in every way. But now, sitting there, watching her granddaughters play, she felt she had finally found the closure she had sought for so long. What Harrison and David had destroyed, she was rebuilding piece by piece. Justice had been served, and while the past couldn't be changed, the future seemed more promising than she had ever imagined. Mildred looked up at the sky, the sun setting on the horizon, and felt grateful for the strength to fight until the end. She wasn't alone anymore, and that, to her, was the greatest victory of all. Mildred's journey shows us that truth can be a powerful, though painful, weapon. For years, she lived believing in a version of the past that wasn't real, and that lie trapped her in a life of pain and loneliness. However, by confronting the revelations brought by her granddaughters, Mildred discovered that the path to emotional freedom required facing the truth, no matter how harsh it was. This story is a lesson in resilience and the power to rise up, even when the world around you seems to be crumbling. We all, at some point, face injustices, but it's in our ability to seek the truth and fight for justice that we find our greatest strength. Like Mildred, we must remember that it's never too late to seek the truth, and that, no matter how dark the circumstances may seem, justice has its own way of flourishing. Her story is an example of what happens when someone refuses to accept lies and manipulation, fighting until the end for something greater than themselves. Let's learn from Mildred that the power of truth can change lives. If you were moved by this story, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Also, share this message with someone who needs a reminder that justice always finds its way.